Hi. We're going to look at more camera controls today to help you shooting with your cameras, and after that we're going to do a video about how we get these things into the software we're probably going to use to edit them. So let's dig right into that. This camera here, this is called a Sigma SD1, which is a digital camera, and this is the old 35mm version of it. But one of the reasons we're talking about this is that they base your cameras, on these. This camera here, you'll see, takes regular film in it, has the viewfinder. We talked a little bit about the diopter. This is where the on switch and various things about taking multiple photos would go. And over here is where we actually set the frame rate. I'm sorry, not the frame rate, but the shutter speed. 1/2000th of a second, 1/200th, so on and so forth. You notice I also have the PASM, which we discussed in the last video. Program mode, meaning the computer figures out everything for you, the computer on the camera, I should say. Aperture mode means you pick what f-stop you want, f1.8, f2, or whatever like that, and it figures out the shutter. Shutter priority, which means you figure out the shutter speed, what of this you want, and it figures out the f-stop. And manual, where you figure out both of those. If we look at our camera here, we have a lot of similar things because they were designed to be easy for people using 35mm cameras to use. So the first thing is, this is our on-off switch. I'm going to go to on there. And we have this presently on manual, meaning I'm going to control both my shutter speed, and I'm also going to control the aperture, how much light I let in. A few things about this. This symbol here, I wonder if we can see that. That symbol right there is where the film plane is, the sensor that we talked about last time. Basically, I could take a ruler or a measuring tape and I could measure to someone, and I could actually focus that way if I wanted to, but I base it on that. If we look at the front here, we have a button to remove the lens. If I hold that in, you'll see I can pull the lens off like that. We don't have much else here. There's a button here that will open up a little flash. We'll talk more about flash at another time. This button, I forget, so we won't talk about it. On the side of this lens, this particular lens lets me use autofocus, which probably people will use most of the time, or manual focus. And actually, if I do that, I can feel the focus ring get looser. It's generally not good to turn it when you're on autofocus. If you're going to focus on your own, leave it in manual. And then this button here, actually, this lens can stabilize itself, which helps with handheld work. I have that on right now. Let's go over the top here, because there's a lot of controls on this particular camera. There's a light here. That light actually, and you can actually see it light up from the camera there, helps with autofocus. It shines light sometimes on the subject to help you get in autofocus. We have a dial here, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And I have a dial here. And I have a button here for ISO, which we're going to talk about in particular. And a button here for how I'm going to set up my f-stops, how I'm going to decide how much light comes into the camera. ISO, let's talk about ISO for a couple minutes. ISO is an old rating for film, which I probably have here somewhere. It actually has to do with how much light the film will take. Where do I set my ISO on this? This camera probably has an auto ISO, meaning the film canister itself has some sensors in there that will tell how much light goes on there. Let me check here. Okay, good. This is old film. I won't be able to see it there. You know what? I can probably hold it here better. Yes. You see that there? I know it's backwards, but it says 160 on it. That means it has an ISO of 160, which is pretty low, meaning it would not be grainy, but it needs a lot of light. The lower the ISO, the more light you need to get on the film, but the less grain you have. A lot of film, when they were still making it, especially these days, if you buy a little roll of film, it's probably got an ISO of 400, which is pretty high. You can sometimes push things, they double them, 400, 800, 1600. 1600, you can shoot indoors without much light. You can go higher. Now, here's the funny thing about that. Those are actually related to the chemicals on the film. We don't have that anymore. We have a sensor, like I showed you last time, and an amplifier that turns up that sensor, but they turn that into an ISO setting. Let me turn this camera on and I'll show you that. If we go back here, we can see all these controls here. Up there is my ISO. If I press that ISO button, it should let me change it. I don't want to change it much. Oh no, there's my ISO down there actually. See, that's this ISO 250. That's basically how grainy my image will look. Digital cameras are much better about it. You can run digital cameras at ISOs of 400, ISOs of 800, 3200 sometimes. There's Sony cameras that will go much higher. You can shoot them almost at night. But your image will get grainier. You want to get the lowest ISO to get a good looking image. This particular camera doesn't do good much above 250. We're going to talk about this back window here too, and these menus as well as these buttons. We mentioned PASM last week, which has my manual control I'm on right now, meaning I'm going to control both my aperture and my shutter speed. And you see I have these two dials. When I turn this dial, see where it says F5.6, F6.3, so on like that? That's how open or closed my aperture is. I'm going to show that to you here. This is a manual lens, so we can see this more easily. This is my aperture setting on that lens, and actually I'll show you. At the top it will say, this is what, an f1.8. So that's the widest opening it has, and every time I click it, it's going to go down one f-stop, which is going to half the amount of room to let light through into a very small hole there. The smallest hole will have the sharpest images, but will need the most light. This dial is going to be how long is my exposure? 250th, 300th, 400th, see that? This here shows where am I going to meter from, where I'm going to decide where I get this from. I have that right in the middle, which means if I hold this button down halfway, my shooting button, it will then meter for whatever that hits in my viewfinder. There's a bunch of other controls here. It tells me if my flash is on. Let's see if I do that. Yeah, see that flash thing just lit up there? I'll put this back down. You don't see it too much, but that got darker. And then I have a bunch of other controls, a menu, which is all the settings on my camera, which we have to read about. By the way, you notice back there, RTFM? To figure stuff out, you oftentimes will have to look up stuff in the manual. And that stands for read the manual, but you don't need to do that so much today. I have a button here, QS. I don't know what that button does. I'm going to look it up by using Google. Let's go over here, and I'm going to go Sigma, because that's this camera, SD1, QS button. Let's see what AI says. Quick set, providing fast access to commonly used shooting options. And so what that means is if I hit that button, I probably can have a whole bunch of things already set up, like my aperture and what have you, and that will automatically go to them. See, I didn't know that until a couple seconds ago. I also can look up the manual on this camera, and I recommend for things you don't understand that you do that. For example, there's a function button here that probably just turns my light on and off. You see I also have a battery setting up there. Let's think about anything else on this particular camera. This is a zoom lens. Here's my focus. You notice my focus goes in feet and meters. And the closest I can get on this lens is 3.8 feet, which is about 4 feet away to have something in focus, or 1.1 meter. You'll see 1.1 meters is about 3.8 feet. If I go to here, that double 8 symbol is infinity. Infinity focus means everything beyond this is in focus. So beyond about 15 or 20 feet, everything will be in focus. This is the actual zoom itself from 200 to 50 millimeters, which is how wide angle or zoomed in I can be on something. This is telling you what the lens is. It's a 50 to 200 millimeter, and it goes from f4 to f5.6. All of that is figured out back here with this dial, which means the lowest this will go is f4. See that? And then if I zoom in, the lowest it'll go is f5.6. See that? And if I zoom back out, you see it go back down to f4. And I can shut down a lens pretty much to an extreme level. And f22 is like that very small hole, which means I would need a lot more light. So either more exposure time or more light. But I would have much greater depth of field and I have a much sharper image. Okay. Let me turn that camera off for now. The camera will turn off automatically in like 5 minutes. You notice the flashing 3.0? Flashing 3.0 means I don't have enough light at these settings. If I turn this way down, let's see if we can get it to give us, come on, there we go. Yes. Okay, that's ridiculous, but I'm going to, change how much light I'm going to let in. Okay. I have my aperture open to its widest, and now I'm going to turn these down until I get it at 0. Okay, right about there. That says 1/3 of a second. If I took this picture right now, besides being wildly out of focus, it would be properly exposed. I'm going to do that just to say I did it. And that was 1/3 of a second, so it's going to shake a lot. Notice that red light, by the way? That red light, and it's going to show me a version of that, which will just be green. That red light means I'm writing to my memory card. Never remove your memory card when that's lit up. When it's done, I can remove my memory card all I want, which is in here. See that? And it says no memory card. And I can stick it back in anytime I want to, except when that light is red. When that light is red, don't touch your memory card. And also have extra batteries. My batteries go in the bottom there. So have extra memory cards, extra batteries. And then remember to turn your camera off. And that should be what we need to shoot.